suspected gunman who attacked and rammed a vehicle into a synagogue in Michigan where children were at school was shot dead. It's also tonight being reported that emergency responders found what appears to be a large amount of explosives in the back of the vehicle. One security officer was hit by the car, but nobody else was injured. We're looking at the aerial imagery here of the scene, which shows smoke billowing from the roof of the synagogue. It's believed to have been caused by the vehicle after it crashed. The area of the attack, Temple, Israel, is home to one of the largest Reform Jewish congregations in America. President Trump made this statement earlier.
I want to send our love to the Michigan Jewish community and all of the people in Detroit area following the attack on the Jewish synagogue early today, and I've been fully briefed. And it's a terrible thing, but it goes on. We're going to be right down to the bottom of it. It's absolutely incredible that things like this happen.
And there was another incident today. A suspect who killed one person and injured two others at the Old Dominion University in Virginia has been identified by authorities as Mohamad Ghazali, who pleaded guilty in 2016 to attempting to provide material support to the Islamic State. Let's get the latest from GBNews' chief US correspondent, Ben Leo. Ben, what do we know?
Hello, Bev. Yes, two big incidents today in the United States. The first came in Virginia, the one you've just mentioned, at the Old Dominion University, where a gunman entered the business school and opened fire, killing one person miraculously. And the FBI have praised the heroics of students in that class. The gunman was jumped by students, and as we understand, apologies for the graphic description, but he was stabbed to death before he could kill anybody else. That gunman screamed Allah Akbar before opening fire and killing the one person who is yet to be identified. The FBI treating it as a terrorist incident, and the gunman himself has been identified as a man called Mohamad Ghazali. He was a US citizen who was previously serving in the National Guard here in the United States. But as you mentioned, crucially, he was jailed in 2017 for attempting to provide the Islamic State with material that would support a terrorist attack. He was served and given, he was sentenced, to 11 years in prison for that crime. In 2017, and he was released for some reason under Joe Biden's Department of Justice just a few years later in December 2024, and of course now he's gone on to commit that act of terror. So that was the first incident. Later on, just a few hours later, we had this really tragic scene in Bloomfield, Michigan, where somebody tried to, they drove their truck into what is the largest synagogue in the United States, the Temple Israel Synagogue, which actually is host to, on site, a preschool, a nursery, which was full of children at the time. The report suggests that the truck had explosives inside. The person had guns on him as well, and before he could unleash any more terror, he was reportedly, we're still trying to get this confirmed, shot dead by a member of staff or killed himself. There were no victims in that attack. Thankfully, it could have been a lot worse. The FBI aren't treating it yet as a terrorist incident, but they have said that it was a targeted attack of violence on the Jewish community. And in the past couple of moments, Bev, the Department for Homeland Security here in the United States have released the identity of that person. He is a chap called Ayman Mohamad Ghazali. He's a Lebanese national who first entered the United States in 2011 on an IR1 immigrant visa, being the spouse of a US citizen. He was naturalized into a US citizen in 2016 under the Obama administration, but we can confirm in the past couple of moments he was a Lebanese national called Ayman Mohamad Ghazali. Crucially, and maybe this saved lots of lives today in Michigan, less than 2 months ago, the FBI was on the site of Temple Israel giving really extensive training to staff members there, members of the congregation, in what to do if there was an active shooter attack. Less than 2 months later, it seems that training came into good use because, as I keep saying, miraculously, no victims today in Michigan. The only person who died was the attacker himself, this Lebanese national, Ayman Mohamad Ghazali. It could have been a hell of a lot worse, Bev, and it comes off the back of President Trump's comments yesterday on the tarmac saying that with regards to Iranian sleeper cells in the United States, the authorities here are, quote, have all eyes on them. So whether these two were linked together, it's pure speculation so far whether Michigan and Virginia were linked, and indeed speculation as to whether these two incidents were linked to the Iranian conflict as well. But for now, Bev, the two attackers identified. Virginia is a terrorist attack. Michigan is not, but it was perpetrated by a Lebanese national. Bev.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Ben Leo there outside a major synagogue here in Washington, D.C. Angelina, let me come to you on this. We have seen the rise in anti-Semitic attacks in the UK since October the 7th, 3 years ago. But what's interesting, I think, where's the difference between the two countries is that we've had multiple Islamic terrorist attacks in the UK over the last 20 years. But not always at Jewish targets. We've had concert halls, we've had random tourists, we had 7th of July on public transport. They weren't targeted against Jewish people. Traditionally in America, not traditionally, but in recent times, have these attacks been predominantly against Jewish targets?
Well, I can't really speak on that directly. I can say that this situation, this was an Israeli temple. It was aligned with Israel. I will say that.
A Jewish temple?
A Jewish temple.
A Jewish synagogue is not an Israeli temple.
It's called the Real Israel Temple.
They're Jewish.
Okay.
They're the people of Israel.
How do you
So I'm going to just finish my point.
It was wrong from the premise. They're not Israeli. They're Jewish.
So they're called the Real Israeli Temple, yes, and they do align with Israel and their beliefs. So this attack. Also, what we found out from the guy who attacked them was that he did have family in Lebanon that was killed from strikes, and that was confirmed. We don't know whether or not who those family members were, but it was posted on social media, his social media, the night prior to the attack, that it was actually his family and his kids that were killed. Now, that hasn't been confirmed by any other news organizations, but that was seen on his social media, and that information has been made public.
And so, is there a part of you then that thinks this is caused by American action within the Middle East prior to today?
For this situation, I can't say whether or not it was or not, but whether or not it was caused by, U.S. interaction in the Middle East, of course you can't say that, but I will say that, we are creating a violent tone in our messaging, and we are attacking families, and we are recklessly killing civilians, whether it's us or Israel, and we're looked at as the target for that. Now, another place to look at this situation where, where were the loose holes? Where do we need to fill in the gaps? Well, the FBI, right? This was a situation, we've talked about this before, Bev. If he was posting on social media and he was announcing, this heartbreak of this situation, we don't know exactly, if there were any messages indicating that he was going to do an attack. But again, this is another place where on social media we have some signs that something is going to happen, or someone is in a deep depression, something is going on, and is the FBI, like this was an immigrant from 2011 who came over for Lebanon. Was the FBI monitoring him, or were they not? What happened there? Where was the breakdown? And the fact that we had 2 attacks in one day, again, the other guy at ODU, he was also, he was already in jail for an act of terrorism. So why wasn't he also being monitored by the FBI? So what can the FBI be doing more to protect U.S. and civilians in America that they're not doing?
Stephen, I can feel you sat there slightly like a coiled spring ready to go on that.
A coiled spring?
Did you hear?
I would never.
Did you hear then it's the fault of the FBI, it's the fault of American foreign policy over the past few years?
Angelina's being polite. I don't believe she said it is the fault of American policy. You do not have to give people involved with radical Islam an excuse to attack Westerners, whether it be the great Satan or the little Satan of Israel. That's baked into their belief system. Now, it is actually a true statement, right, that American foreign policy and meddling in the Middle East, when you cause harm to families, when you kill people, often their children are going to fall down radicalization pipelines just out of pure bitterness and a desire for revenge. That's a proven fact. But I find it to be disgusting, jarring, telling that the first thing that we're going to talk about is the guy's motivation. His tragic story was why he needed to be pushed in order to do this attack on a synagogue. A lot of people endure tragedy in their lives, and they don't immediately drive to a synagogue where there is a daycare with explosives in their car to kill Jews, which is what this was. It is what it was about, and the internet works fast. This guy's brothers are Qasim and Ibrahim Ghazali. They are members of Hezbollah's Imam al-Mahdi scouts. This is all coming out very quickly. We're sitting here and learning this right here at the desk. This guy had no ties to terror in the Middle East, and this is not a surprise. Now, why were his family killed in an airstrike by the Israelis? I mean, I would want to know where they were. Why were they in these places where there are being targeted airstrikes on Hezbollah? That's a valid question.
Let's go to Matthew in London and ask his take on this, because it is the question which is asked in the aftermath of anything like this, and this could have been so much worse today. Matt, it could have been horrific. Looking at those pictures of those children running out of that synagogue, is where does the responsibility lie? Whose fault is it, Matthew?
I think ultimately it's the fault of the individual involved that has aimed to, permit terror today. Whatever the reasoning, whatever the understanding, I think the thing that is sad is, certainly in the West, it is a crime to be Jewish at the moment. And I hold no candle to Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's policy decisions, certainly international policy decisions at the moment. But innocent Jews are being targeted in America, in the UK. And I think because of that, actually, there's a counter effect, because then innocent Muslims are targeted because people then think it's all Muslims. We saw in Manchester a couple of weeks ago during the by-election, there was an individual that entered a mosque in Manchester attempting to cause harm during Ramadan. We have Northwest London sectarian tensions rising between Hindus and Muslims. I think what we're seeing both here and across the pond is a rise in division. And I'm not sure what we do about that, because foreign policy is foreign policy. That is going to impact things back home. This is why wars of choice and other things concern me. But I do worry about where we're going with all of this, and why we're becoming more divided, whether it's politicians at the top, whether it's communities being more fractured, social media causing people to be inside more and not knowing their neighbours, and therefore being instinctively suspicious of them, fear of the other. There's a whole load of things that we could reel off, but I think the sad thing is innocent people have been targeted today. We had it, in a state close by in Pennsylvania. You had the governor of Pennsylvania had his home set on fire purely for being Jewish, and the arsonist said it's because crimes against Palestinians were at his door. So, this has been simmering for quite some time, and I don't know what we do about it.
OK, thank you, Matt. Let's talk to a man who might know what we do about it. Michael Waller is the former CIA operative and senior analyst for strategy at the Centre for Security Policy. Michael, good evening to you. Thank you for joining me. What do we do about it? How do you stop an ideology wanting to cause harm to Americans, and particularly American Jewish people?
Well, we did denazification really well after 1945, and you had no serious resurgence of that presented a major threat anywhere. It's that we in the West have been completely reluctant to discuss the ideology that motivates these types of terrorists and extremists who are destroying our countries through legal means and illegal and violent means. So as long as we fail to address the threat, we're not going to be able to confront the ideology. And as long as we're therefore covering up for that motivating ideology, which is the extreme interpretations of political Islam, we're not going to solve the problem.
I think you've got problems. We've just come up with a definition of Islamophobia in the UK, which will make it very, very difficult to have the conversation that you want to have, Michael, in terms of being literally, potentially breaking the law if you criticise Islam in any way. How have we got into the place where we can't have the honest conversation about it? Who do you blame for that?
Well, we blame a lot of the corrupt politicians who are in the pay of various regimes, like the Qatar regime, for example, which has been sponsoring politicians in the U.S. and the U.K. They own a lot of property, they employ a lot of people, and they fund a lot of this terrorism and extremism. But after 9/11, immediately, if I was there, I was part of the policy process at the time. If you when you even tried to discuss the Wahhabist or Salafist or Muslim Brotherhood strains of Islam, you were immediately branded as Islamophobic. The Soviets did the same thing. They had the term Russophobia. You can't criticize us. So it's a phony thing to attribute a mental illness or a paranoia to something that's really real. Even though we have Muslim governments in Egypt, friendly country to us, in United Arab Emirates, and elsewhere, who have labeled these groups properly, but we don't dare to borrow from them and to take their advice.
So President Trump has made some improvements in that area, hasn't he? I feel like this government are doing a better job of clamping down and prescribing the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organisation, at least in some states, Michael.
Right. Some chapters abroad, but there's a whole network here in the United States that we've barely touched yet, because they're being very careful to operate inside the law until such time that they're ready not to.
Sorry, thank you for correcting me on that. So just to clarify, there are chapters of the Muslim Brotherhood overseas which America has designated as terrorists, but you would like to see that go further here in the US, would you?
Yes, as domestic terrorist organizations. The problem is we don't have a law that allows that.
And why is that? Just explain that to our British audience. What would that mean?
A lot of it's constitutional arguments about freedom of speech or freedom of assembly or freedom of religion, and those are all legitimate, but we also have laws making it a crime to conspire to violently overthrow the Constitution of the United States. So by definition, any Islamist movement, any political Islam movement that seeks to have Sharia law, by definition, is plotting to overthrow our constitutional system. That is a crime. It's just that it hasn't been prosecuted well by anybody at the federal level, even though certain states, like the state of Texas, recently passed a law banning Sharia law in the state of Texas. It is being held to account now at the state level. I believe Florida is passing something similar.
So we have the same argument in the UK. We will hear that, well, we have freedom of religion, so we can't have freedom of religion without allowing Muslims to behave in ways that Christians might find problematic, etc. Are you saying that you think there should be different rules should apply to Islam than to other religions?
Well, religion is one thing. You can be free to believe what you want, but you're not free to impose that as a political ideology on the whole country. So in either of our countries, when you have foreign elements coming in and basically colonizing, not assimilating, and then start demanding that the local population adhere to their politicized religious ideologies and make that the law of the land, whether it concerns women, whether it concerns how to treat children, or even whether to have dogs. When they're doing these things to undermine us, and we're just meekly caving in over and over, and you've got a defender of the faith in the UK that doesn't seem to be defending the faith very well, but does seem to be defending the political Islam, and it's a shame. And the same here. We have freedom of religion here, but because of the name of the religion is in the movement, people say, oh, that's a religious movement. That's nonsense. That's like if Catholic movements were saying we're going to impose whatever the Pope says in the United States. That was a fear for a long time in the United States, but it was an ungrounded fear.
Fascinating, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us this evening on The Late Show Live. Former CIA operative and senior analyst for strategy at the Centre for Security Policy, Michael Waller, great to see you again.